forever young? Or am I faking on the tip of my tongue? There's a sarcasm waiting for you. I'm willing to trade my soul for a bit of your charm. There's no way I fade into oblivion, 'cause I'll keep shining over you all. And if your wings entwining, you better face the fall, keep trying again. Oh yeah, keep trying again. There's mud on the floor, disparate people trying to get through the door, although the room's already crowded. But I'll keep shining over you all. And if your wings entwining, you better face the fall, keep trying again. Oh yeah, keep trying again. Zeros, everybody's trying to be heroes, when all they have to say to be okay is I don't know. And keep trying again. I'll keep shining over you all. With your wings entwining, you better face the fall. Zero, everybody's trying to be heroes, when all they have to say to be okay is I don't know. Are you okay? I'm not that sure. Forever young, or am I faking on the tip of my tongue? There's a sarcasm waiting for you. I'm willing to trade my soul for a bit of your charm. There's no way I fade into oblivion, 'cause I'll keep shining over you all. And if your wings entwining, you better face the fall, keep trying again. Oh yeah, keep trying again. There's mud on the floor, disparate people trying to get through the door, although the room's already crowded. But I'll keep shining over.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome here to race number 10 of season 52 of the RTG Tally Challenge. More importantly, welcome to the playoffs. We begin the 5-race road to determining who the 4 will be to battle for the championship. 13 competitors enter into the fray in the first playoff race of this season. I'm Seth Cole alongside of Zach Freeman. And Zach, It's, I believe, the biggest playoff field that RTG has had here in this series. The problem is, though, there are so many drivers that are competing for these first 2 races, but 5 of them at the conclusion of next week are going home.
Thank you, Seth, very much. Yes, as you mentioned, 13 drivers, but only 1 trophy at the end of the road. We come in with these 13 drivers who fought valiantly throughout the regular season, be it through wins or through points. They've made it this far. And yes, like you said again, Seth, 5 drivers at the end of next week's race will be eliminated. So I think we're going to see a lot of hustle bustle out there on the racetrack today. One driver in particular, Josh Metallic, we know he will not be here next week, so he's going to have to fight exceptionally hard to try to get himself a victory to lock himself in. But we've seen stranger things happen, Seth. We'll have to see how it plays out.
Certainly have. Metallic won the first regular season race on the year. Can he win the first playoff race? Let's find out. Let's go down and talk with our pre-race interview driver, the driver of the number 39, Josh Metallic. Hey Josh, it's Zach and Seth up here in the FRM booth. You got us?
I got you.
All right, man, you started out the season strong, took a checkered flag. Now it's the postseason. Can you do it again? Get the first win here of the playoffs?
I have to. I will be missing in action next week. I'll be taking a little trip, a little vacation. So I do not have enough points to point my way in. So especially with missing next week. So it's all or nothing. Got to win tonight or be done for the season as far as the championship goes.
Hey, Josh, how much added pressure does that put you on there to go out and get this victory tonight? Because as you mentioned, that's your only guarantee through to the next round of the playoffs. What kind of moves are we going to have to see you make out there to try to make that happen?
We'll have to be aggressive. I actually got my best qualifying run of the year. I have no idea where that came from, but I'll take it. Try to keep it up front as long as I can and hope for some luck at the end and, you know, a few people that might be able to push me towards the win. But it's so tough. You know, I've positioned myself multiple times and you get shuffled out and then you're in 20th in a blink of an eye. So I will be aggressive. I'm going to try to not do anything stupid, but try to put myself in a spot where I could maybe move on possibly.
Josh, we've seen in the last few weeks a lot of drivers show up for races. We've had anywhere from 35 to 39 drivers in the field, 37 going to take the green flag here tonight. We've seen some really crazy races leading up here to the playoffs. A lot of that attributed to the large fields, but we also attributed it to drivers feeling desperation. It was their last chance to get into the playoffs. Now that the playoff field has been set, do you see a slightly different Talladega race here tonight, or do you think it's going to be a lot of what we've seen in the past 3 or 4 weeks?
I think it'll be a lot of the same. You know, 2/3 of the field, they're just here to win. You know, they don't care about us chase drivers, and they shouldn't. And then guys in the chase, you know, you can't be timid. You know, you gotta try to put yourself into a smart spot where you can survive. And if you have a chance to do anything beyond survive, you know, possibly steal a win, you got to really go for it. And then again, the penalty, if you cause a wreck in doing so, is massive. You know, you go to the back in a 35-car pack, you may never see the top 10 again. So a lot of risk and reward, dangerous moves you have to make, but so it makes it fun.
All right, well, Josh, we're going to let you go and get yourself mentally focused here tonight for these 66 laps. Best of luck to you.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
That was Josh Metallic, who will be rolling off from the outside of row 2 as the field starts to grid up. Joe DeSpirito will sit on the pole position. It is his 6th, I believe, pole. Nope, correction. Yes, it is his 6th pole of the season, so that is his league leading 6th pole on the year, as he'll start alongside of Bob Seminara, who was looking to get his 5th. Row 2 is going to find Grant Wesley and, at the driver we just talked to, Josh Metallic. Row 3, Chuck McClure and Bernie Mobbs. Row 4 will be Dante Ricky and Donnie Garrett. And row 5, Billy Elliser and Tim Nofsker. 9 of our playoff contenders starting up inside of the top 10. John Fergioni in the 095, making his 2nd start on the season in that ride, his 3rd start overall. He'll be 11th alongside of Rodney Sullins. Jeremy Jeffries, playoff contender, alongside of Jerm Lewis in row 7. Ken Roberts and Dave Melson will make up row 8. Playoff contender Jeff Crivello will line up 17th alongside of Perry Bond in row 9. Row 10 completed by Bobby Farrell and Richard Martin. 21st will be Wiley Coate, Chris Elliott in 22nd. Row 12 finds Glenn Harris and Terry Bombard, Todd Mallory and Chris Emery, playoff contender, back in 26th. Mike Rogers and Gary Hurst in row 14. Row 15 will find Bob Dixon, the last driver to take time, and Jason Scheck. Jessica Shelton and John Godfrey back in row 16. Hank Middleton was the only playoff driver not to take time here tonight. He'll roll off from 33rd alongside of Cy Jones, and the rest of the field will be Mark Paglia, Wayne Pribnow, and making his first start in the season, the number 25, Brian Bell, will start 37th in tonight's field. And the big field, Zach, was the talking point we had at the end of last week's race, where if playoff drivers run into issues tonight, they're going to have a big hole to dig themselves out of next week.
Absolutely. And that's something that we've consistently talked about for the majority of the season. Really, with the size of the fields that we've had, I don't think we've dipped anywhere below 35 cars. And what that can mean for you in a single race, if you're the first car out of contention, everybody else around you continues on and makes it to the finish, that could put you at that much of a deficit. So we know right now the way that the playoff point grid is structured, Joe DeSpirito has a 36-point lead over 13th place Josh Metalik. Now, we have 37 cars on the track tonight, so the likelihood of Joe DeSpirito falling to 13th, unlikely, but if he were to have a bad run here tonight and another next week, those points could knock him out in playoff round number 1. And that shows you a little bit of this urgency that we kind of heard out of Josh Metalik when we talked to him pre-race. And he said, I've got to go out there and get a win because I don't have the points to be able to miss a week and still make it to round 2 of the playoffs. So we'll have to see how it plays out. As he mentioned, a lot of other guys just want to go out there and win, which they rightly should, but these playoff guys got a lot to lose. So a lot to be lost, a lot to be gained, though, too. So we'll have to see how it plays out.
Joe DeSpirito with a much different scenario coming into the playoffs this season than he did last year. Last year, he won the regular season championship but had no wins during the regular season. This year, he won the regular season championship with 2 trips to victory lane. He was the first winner in the playoffs last season. Can he do it again in back-to-back season? Well, we'll find out as the green flag's underway. The playoffs begin in the Tally Challenge.
They march off down into turn 1, still side by side primarily throughout the field. Grant Wesley going to sneak up on the rear bumper of the 24 of DeSpirito. See if off turn 2, yes, DeSpirito does look like he's going to slide up just a little bit, so they're already forming that middle line. First 3 hooked up will be DeSpirito, Wesley, and Seminara down into turn number 3.
Inside line's going to be led by Chuck McClure. He's got 2-time winner Dante Ricky behind him. Of course, Dante filling in Robbie Nice's 54 for the remainder of the season in the blue oval. He has won the last 2 races, so he's trying to go for 3 in a row and lock himself into the round of 8.
Absolutely, and we know that Dante is a very stout contender. He won multiple times last season as well, and he made it known at the end of last week, hey, we're here and we're here to play. We're going to knock off 2 wins in a row, get into these playoffs, and we're going to take it as deep as we can. So far, I've been giving that 54 machine a solid run. You see Grant Wesley, he's going to dive down to the inside of DeSpirito off a 2, going to try to make it side by side down the backstretch, but Metalik just not quite to the 88's rear bumper down into 3.
This is interesting because normally we're used to seeing drivers up in the top 3, 4, 5, 6. They'll all line up single file. You saw Metalik jump out early. The 2 words he said when we talked with him pre-race, be aggressive. Grant Wesley following that same mentality, trying to get to the front early.
Absolutely, and we see just a little bit farther back, Jeremy Jeffries has formed up that 3rd line coming out of the Trioval. It looks to be about 5 rows deep before you get to that first 3 wide situation. Knopfler's in the middle right now. He's going to be a bit hung out as he falls back. That low line and top line together, they're going to be looking to eat up Donnie Garrett off of turn number 2.
Tim Knopfler trying to do 2 things here for the remainder of the season. Number 1 is find victory lane for the first time this year. Of course, remember back, we thought he had won the 2nd race on the season, but that race was rescinded in favor of Billy Elliser. He's also trying to see if he can be the highest to finish in the point standings that did not make the playoffs. Right now, he is 14th in the overall points over Jerm Lewis, Chris Elliott, and others. So a little bit of bragging rights there for the drivers that didn't make the playoffs to try and finish the highest of those that are not competing for the championship.
Absolutely. And if we know if anybody's capable of doing it, it would be that 088 car. Very strong contender out here week in and week out. No matter where he starts in the field, he makes himself known. So right now, 3 wide has worked its way all the way up to the battle for the 5th position coming off of turn number 2 now. Josh Metalik was leading that inside line, but Despirito and Wesley decided they were going. Oh, car down to the inside.
Wiley Coaten the 6, I do believe.
I don't believe this is going to bring out a yellow. He did hit that outside wall pretty hard. However, there are no cars oncoming, so I believe we're going to stay clean and green for the time being. Right now, Despirito leading the low lane off of turn number 4. Donnie Garrett about 5 cars back, still trying to make a run in that extreme top line through the tri-oval now.
Pace car lights still off, so we remain under the green flag, and we're seeing something here that we saw near the end of last week's race, which kind of took us by surprise. That middle line all dropping towards the rear, kind of stuck in the proverbial sucker hole. Now, we normally didn't see that most of this season. The middle line used to be the line everybody wanted to be in, but the last week or two, it's actually been the weaker line to be in.
And it's something that we've kind of talked about a little bit the last whoa, almost trouble there. Wesley almost gets into the left rear of Despirito. Both drivers will save it. They will continue on. Wesley with no help down low now. He's going to fall back just a little bit. Despirito continues to lead the field in the middle line with Chuck McClure on his back bumper.
Despirito tried to block Metalic's move high, then tried to block Wesley low, and we nearly had ourselves a wreck up at the front of the field, which could have really thrown a monkey wrench into this playoff system. Now, there are 9 of our playoff contenders from last season that made the playoffs this season. 4 drivers made it in for the first time in a while, one of them actually for the first time in his career, that being Chris Emery. The other 3 drivers that did not partake in the playoffs last season that made it this season included Donnie Garrett. His last playoff appearance was back in season 50. Hank Middleton, whose last playoff appearance was back in season 44. And Jeff Crivello, whose last playoff appearance was back in season 48. So a couple of these drivers have had some streaks, if you will, some droughts of making it into the postseason. You got to wonder if they're going to be kind of like the duck take to water analogy of them being able to compete with drivers that were in the playoff grid last season.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see as this playoff goes on, Seth, if that does end up being the case, because we've seen how unpredictable this series can be week in and week out. They're at a super speedway where anything can happen anywhere throughout the field, and that can get you in a lot of trouble. Other guys just taking breaks once in a while, not always there to run for the full season, like we saw with Jeremy Jeffries and Tim Nofsker in season number 51. They missed the first half of the season, tried to get themselves in, but couldn't. But the point in all this being, these guys that they've been in previous seasons, they do have the experience, and experience counts for quite a bit. So given the opportunity, you can bet these guys are going to capitalize on it as best as possible.
2 of our playoff contenders that started towards the rear of the field, one of them with a slower qualifying effort, one of them not even laying down a qualifying lap. Hank Middleton and Chris Emery have not made a whole lot of forward progress. They're still outside of the top 20. Middleton was 25th last time across the line. Chris Emery 29th. Now, obviously, they're adapting the watch what's happening ahead. If a big wreck happens, then be able to avoid it, but it's not always a guarantee, as we've seen this season, that running towards the back is not going to involve you in a wreck, dependent on where it takes place.
Well, we've seen people be running in first and second position and not be safe from wrecks. So like you said, there is no safe place on the racetrack. The best thing you can really do in these circumstances, try to kind of put yourself in a place where you're the most comfortable. And if you're the most comfortable riding around at the back for the first part of the race, sometimes that's the best option for you. And it works out sometimes, but other times it doesn't. It doesn't matter how aggressive you are. If trouble's going to find you at Talladega, it's going to find you one way or the other. Right now, top 5 checked out in that middle line. We've got 3 wide battle for its 6th position. It looks like McClure is going to be working the inside of the 77 of Garrett. Garrett now going to slide up in front of the 9 of Elliott off of turn number 2.
The 26 of Billy Ellis are there behind Grant Wesley, who finally found a drafting partner when stuck by himself on the inside line. He currently runs unofficially in the 8th position, as Josh Metalik, Donnie Garrett going to hook up. But I was looking at the point standings coming into tonight's race. And a few names that kind of popped out to me where they were positioned in points were Josh Metallic, Dante Ricky, and Billy Elliser. They come in of the 13 playoff contenders 11th, 12th, and 13th, and I thought, well, hold on. They've got victories. Drivers like Crivello and Emery, they don't. Why are those drivers that have wins not running higher in the point standings than those that have not found victory lane? The big reason? Those that made it into the top 10 got bonus points. Those that didn't, those 3 drivers, despite having wins, since they did not finish in the top 10 overall, they only got the win bonus points. They did not get any extra bonus points for their position in the standings.
Absolutely, and it really makes sense if you think about it, because those bonus points for playoffs are only intended for your top 10. So these guys got a little bit extra work that they got to do. But what's even more exciting than that to me, Seth, is if you looked at positions 8 through 13th, you've only got a total of 6 points separating all 6 of those drivers coming into this race. So that makes it a little bit more exciting too. There's a lot on the line because those top 4, they've got a pretty good gap, but you get from 5th on down, man, there's a lot that you can lose if something bad happens to you out on the racetrack.
Josh Metallic and Chuck McClure trying to make that outside line work, and I think DeSpirito and Dante Ricky saw that outside line was forming. They jumped up to the top, but that left the door open down low. There's some shoving going on there with Jeffries, Melson, and Garrett.
Absolutely, and you see those guys trying to make that low line work. That 3 number that we've talked about in weeks past seems to be that sweet spot for making the most speed, but once you start adding more cars into that, it tends to get a little bit squirrely, as we saw on the back straightaway. There was 4 or 5 cars that had bumpers locked all at the same time. They look to have gotten it straightened out right now through the tri-oval. Jeffries does slide up with the help of Melson and Garrett into that middle line. Josh Metallic making a strong run up on that top line into turn number 1.
It was about 7 laps ago when Wiley Coate had his issue on the back straightaway. The field is now about half a backstretch behind him, about to put him a lap down. So Wiley Coate, obviously one of those drivers, would love to see a caution right now to either stay on the lead lap or get the lucky dog. A little shifting going on there at the front as the bumpers almost weren't lined up between the 8 and the 38.
Man, and I'll tell you what, this is going to be hairy coming off this 4th corner because they're coming up on this 6 car, but they're 3 wide behind him. There is nowhere for anybody to go. Wiley's going to try to keep it as tight up against the wall as he can through the tri-oval 4 wide. If they're going to go 4 wide, that's probably the place to do it. He's going to fall back to about mid-pack. Everybody looks to have made it through at the start-finish line. Right now, Chris Elliott, your leader, into 1.
Yeah, Chris Elliott was poised to make it into the playoffs last week, but took vacation in the Outer Banks, but he's back this week ready to race, and he's trying to get that Cheetos Dodge to the front.
And we're seeing these 3 lines as competitive as we've seen them together all season long. Jeffries not really able to make much ground. Metallic not able to make much ground. Chris Elliott, he makes that ground up, and then those 2 lines below him make it right back up again. So parity is about as strong as we've seen it all season long, Seth.
Trying to count back there. I think I ended at 9 rows of 3 wide racing here. And these guys are shifting lanes, bottom to top, top to middle, and still no line getting an advantage. To your point, it was Elliott leading that lap, but not even by a full car length over Metallic or Jeffries.
That time by the line looked exactly the same as it looked by the line the last time by. So off of turn number 2 here, Jeffrey looks to have the slight advantage, but then down about halfway down the backstretch, it's Metallic. Now heading off into turn number 3, Sullen's going to give a good shove to Elliott, pushing him out in the lead. And these 3 lines just keep shifting it back and forth. Right now, Seth, there's no room to make any moves. It depends on whichever line is moving is the one that you're stuck in, because you can't swap at this point unless you're toward the tail end of the pack.
And depending on where a mistake might be made here, I'm seeing so many playoff contenders in this vicinity. You've got the 8, the 39, the 26, 17, 77, 24. The 2 of Hank Middleton's actually there. I believe that's 4th car in that middle line. So if trouble breaks out, some of these playoff contenders could be in trouble, because to your point, there's nowhere to go for these guys, and if a wreck takes place, it's going to block the track up.
Absolutely. Right now, that low line with the clear advantage. They've got a car length over the middle line who has about a half a car length over the high line. They're going to close it up again just a little bit into turn number 3. And race fans, we're not trying to tell you that there's no passing going on the racetrack, but these three lines right now just keep swapping back and forth as to which is going to be the fastest. Currently, Jeffries looks to have the best hot laps out on the track right now. Again, that middle line going to make a run for it through the tri-oval.
And oh, by the way, we're only about 4 laps away from when these drivers are going to have to start thinking about making their first round of green flag pit stops. I mean, 3 wide, several rows deep is going to be very difficult to get yourself traffic control back to double wide or maybe single file to be able to get onto pit lane in a pack.
Yeah, and we'll have to see what happens here because now the 9 of Elliott, that top line has fallen back about 2 or 3 cars now. Josh Metallic now out with the comfortable lead into turn number 3. Now the middle line with the advantage with Jeffries and Elliott on either the inside or outside line. But Jeffries, strong run on the bottom through 3 out of 4. It looks like he's going to have the advantage into the tri-oval.
Middle line had to check up a little bit there. Donnie Garrett had a bit of an issue lining up the bumper through the center of the corner with Chuck McClure. He checked up Joe DeSpirito. They all were able to keep it together. It gave Jeffries a little bit of an advantage on the bottom, but now the middle line's gotten formed up again. Talek might be clear of Jeffries here through the center of 1 and 2, but the 8 charges back.
I'm looking at that 24 of Joe DeSpirito, our point leader. It looks to have a little bit of internet warp going on there. A slight bit of side to side. Seems to stabilize out. And now Chuck McClure, he's going to look to the low side. He wants to lead, but Metallic blocks down low. Now Metallic and McClure, who made their moves in that middle line, both to the bottom. Garrett now leading that middle line with help from the 24 of DeSpirito.
And again, if you're just joining us, folks, Josh Metallic, we talked with him pre-race. He will not be here next week. This is a win or go home night for the 39 car, and I'm loving the aggressiveness we're seeing out of him. I mean, it's a case of bring home the trophy or bring home the steering wheel, because if you wreck here tonight, you know, at least you know that you wrecked trying to advance your way into the playoffs. Next week is a moot point.
Absolutely. So that's exactly what he's trying to do right now. Just get it out front, try to keep it out front. That's probably the best mentality you can have. Now we're 18 laps in. Next time by will be lap number 19. We're going to have to start looking at some of these guys with their hands out the window, probably the next time by down the backstretch, anticipating a load of these cars. Now 4 wide through the middle of the corner as you see Wade Pribnow's number 00 car. He will be put a lap down. And there goes our first round of pit stops right now. Jeffries and Melson.
These were a couple of drivers that were working together on the inside. Oh, they got to come back up the track. We're still green, still green. No caution yet.
Now
the
yellow
caution's
is
out.
Not
Jeff
sure
Crivello
what triggered
was
that.
involved in that, one of our playoff drivers.
I saw the Perry Bond machine, his car airborne. I don't think he actually flipped over at any point, but didn't see what caused that as the camera was panning back to the cars coming in, but it looks to be 3, maybe 4 cars involved. And Seth, it's not something that we're really surprised to see. I don't think we've seen this in the past when we get these long green flag runs like this and they come in. Some of these guys just take different lines, and when they're running 3 wide the way that they were off that 4th corner, that makes it a little harder to judge exactly who's doing what as well. So maybe it had something to do with it.
Drivers that did make it onto pit road there were Jeremy Jeffries, Dave Melson, and it looked like the 143 of Bob Dixon. Something we didn't see off camera. The lap before that, Bob Seminara had actually come to pit road and was just ahead of the leaders when the caution came out, so he will remain on the lead lap. And with the timing of that yellow, and depending on what he did on pit road, he actually might be able to stay out and inherit the race lead.
Yeah, I'm going to bet that's exactly what's going to happen once this cycles out. I think we're going to see Seminara probably on point with the 8 and 38 cars right behind him. So now we're going to have to keep an eye behind the pace car as these leaders will also be due in to come in. But Seth, I'm looking right now and it looks like the 712 may actually be behind the Jeffries and Melson machine. So we'll have to see how scoring pans out here in just a moment.
Well, we took a look at the incident that brought out this caution. We talked about that 4 wide situation with drivers trying to get around Wade Pribnow. That kind of led to this as Perry Bond was trying to give room to the 00. He crowds down Wiley Coate and Jeff Crivello. And I'll tell you the driver right now that might need a new change of pants, and that would be the 038 of Dave Melson, because that airborne Perry Bond machine came right up to his right rear quarter panel. I don't think he made contact, but I don't think he could have fit a sheet of paper between the two of them.
No, absolutely not. So I think Melson's going to be probably pretty happy at this point that he got his car serviced and back out on the racetrack with no incident. You've seen him be a very strong car today. It looks like Melson's got a pretty quick hot rod underneath him there. So pretty thankful that that 60 car didn't land right on top of him.
Might be the first time all season we're using a rear bumper cam, but this is from the back of the 038. Watch Perry Bond come sliding in there left side of the screen, and then he also had, I believe it was Wiley Coate and Jeff Crivello sliding around the left side of his car, so almost picking up the 710 split, if you will.
Absolutely. And Seth, you know what that's like having driven these cars. You see some trouble happening, transpiring behind you in your mirror, and you just hold on and hope that they don't run into the back of you.
Yeah, it's one of those tough things, too, because you're coming to pit road, so you want to speed up instinctually, seeing those drivers sliding towards you, but you also want to make sure you're not going to speed when you get to the commitment line.
Absolutely. It looks like he's got down and away just fine here. So as scoring does loop itself back around, Seth, it is looking like the 712 of Seminara now being scored in second position, with the 143 of Dixon being our leader. So not sure if maybe the 8 and 038 cars forewent their pit stops. They may have had to completely drive through pit road depending on when that yellow came out. If they weren't already in their boxes, they may not have actually been able to get service. So I'm thinking that might be what's going on with those two at the moment.
Good point. I'm not necessarily certain. I think the both of them were on pit road past the commitment line before the caution came out, because let's remember, it took about 5 to 7 seconds after the wreck actually took place for the yellow flag to fly. And I think the reason that the yellow flag actually flew, Mark Paglia was having a little bit of an issue getting onto pit road. He actually forewent crossing the commitment line, came back out onto the racetrack, and so I believe that the race officials read that as oncoming traffic. That's why the yellow flag was thrown. Otherwise, we might not have actually had a caution at this point in time.
All right, and we did see an incident like this a few weeks ago, but unfortunately, it just kind of is what it is. But it gives us a good chance here to catch our breath. And with some of the three-wide racing action that we've seen so far tonight, Seth, I would say that's probably one of the longest spans of green flags we've seen all season long with that caliber racing.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, there were a couple of times near the end of the race, I think it was back in races 5 and 6, where we end up seeing that type of racing coming down to the checkered flag. But at least towards the beginning of the race, it was usually drivers kind of minding their P's and Q's, protecting their equipment until that first round of green flag pit stops. But here, being the first race of the playoffs, it's almost kind of like green flag dropped and all bets were off.
And that's exactly how they're running it out there right now. So as we mentioned again, Bob Dixon and the 143 Petty blue and red car. He's going to be on point here at the moment. Bob Seminara, as you mentioned, came down to pit a lap earlier than we caught on cameras there, so he's going to be good. But Seth, now it also makes me wonder, does this put them at a 2 or 3 lap disadvantage as far as fuel's concerned from the leaders? Because if we have another green flag run like that, these guys are going to have to duck in before the cars that just came in under yellow. So that's something else that we're going to have to keep an eye out for.
Yeah, but it also was right around the time when normally drivers that are going to come to pit road early, when they would come to pit road, right around the completion of lap 18 on to 19. It's like 19 to 21 is the window, so they should be okay. Obviously, their strategy now, if we go into a long green flag run, they're going to have to short pit again. Their fuel tank's not going to allow them to be able to stretch it and maybe come down with a bigger group. If they're able to get another caution, so let's say in the next 10 to 12 laps, more than likely everybody will come down pit road and everybody will be on a level playing field again.
So as we score it right now, judging by the scoring monitor, our top 10 as they run, Bob Dixon, Bob Seminara is in second, Josh Metallic, Chuck McClure, Joe DeSpirito, they will round out our top 5, Donnie Garrett, Grant Wesley, Hank Middleton, Tim Nosker, and Chris Elliott, your top 10. So by my count right now, that is 8 playoff contenders occupying the top 10 positions out there on the racetrack. I don't think that's anything we're really surprised to see at this juncture.
No, absolutely not. And I think we're just going to continue to see more of that as this race goes on. I think you're going to see a lot of your playoff contenders up there inside of the top 10 when we take the white flag. Somebody here tonight, I've got the feeling, is going to lock themselves into the round of 8. And, we talked about Joe DeSpirito last season, how he didn't start picking up any wins until the playoffs began. He won 3 in a row once the playoff system was started. The important thing was in that first and third win, he ensured himself spots into the next round. So that's what's on the line for a number of these drivers here tonight. A chance to go into the elimination race next week completely worry-free, knowing you're going to be one of the 8 representatives moving on to battle in the Final Four.
Absolutely. If you're a playoff contender, a playoff week number 1 win is tremendous to your success, because although you don't want to just roll over for week number 2, that gives you a little bit more of an opportunity to maybe be a little bit more aggressive, maybe take a little bit more chances, because you're locked in for race number 3 of the playoffs, so you don't have to worry so much. Not that you want to go out there and tear up your equipment, but that those wins are just bonus points toward the next round. So wins are everything, Seth.
Wiley Cote and Wayne Pribnow, you saw go around to get their laps back. This will put Pribnow back on the lead lap. Wiley Cote actually lost 2 laps after his incident on the back straightaway that did not bring out a yellow back on lap 5. He will now be -1 to the leaders. All 36 drivers, though, still running, 35 of them on the lead lap, and we're getting ready to turn them loose and have them go at it again. I don't know when this manufacturer change took place. I'm so used to seeing Bob Dixon in the Dodge he started out the season with, but making the move over to Ford Mustang here at some point in that very familiar red and blue STP colored machine.
Absolutely. And we've seen Bob have some really good runs out here, so I wouldn't be surprised if having a little bit of this better track position might play to his advantage here on the restart. But you also have no slouches in positions 2, 3, 4, or anywhere else back through the pack. So he's going to have to make sure that he can keep on that 39 cars back bumper, because I'll tell you what, Bob Seminara, no stranger to victory lane at Talladega either.
Absolutely not. Seminara, a winner this season, and comes into the playoffs second in the standings, only 9 points behind his teammate Joe DeSpirito for the current overall points lead in the playoff system. We are more than a third of the way through this race. Lap 24 is when the green flag will come back out here at Talladega, and Chuck McClure was ready for it. He gave a shot to Bob Seminara, but I'm not necessarily certain that gap between the two of them is going to help them through 1 and 2.
And we got trouble already in turn number 1. It looks like one car sideways tagged another one that spun up the racetrack. Not sure. It looks like the yellow flag is back out. It was at the very rear of the field.
And a couple of Fords were involved in that one. Bobby Farrell and playoff contender Jeff Crivello in the 56.
Man, you hate to see that for Jeff. He did such great work all season long getting himself into playoff contention, and now that's 2 separate incidents in a row that he's unfortunately been involved in. So not a good playoff week number 1 start for the Crivello machine.
See if we can find out what happened to them. A very early caution flag coming out here. The field hadn't even made it half a lap since taking the green flag for this restart, and it didn't look like either driver really sustained a lot of damage from what I saw when they were leaving the scene of the accident. We'll see here more in depth with this replay what happened. Oh, there was actually a big stack up on that restart. Hard to tell who it began with. It might have been John Godfrey, I think, that stacked up Shelton, Mike Rogers, and others on that inside line. And finally, the chain reaction ended with the contact between Farrell and Crivello.
Yeah, and unfortunately, you hate to see something like that. And that's just one of those things when you're at the back of the pack. Sometimes you don't get that communication in front of you that somebody didn't fire off. And by the time you realize that there's an issue, your front end is already in the rear end of another car. So you hate to see that happen for both of those drivers. But one of those things that you just got to try to stay sharp about on the restarts, and they can definitely bite you and cost you a lot of time. So hopefully both drivers can get those cars attended to by their pit crews, and they won't have too much problem continuing on from there.
Talk about that visibility problem going on board here with Jeff Crivello. All he can see is the back bumper of Bobby Farrell up ahead. There you see the stack of just no reaction time. And while even on board it doesn't look like that hard a hit, the thing that makes me a little bit worried was the contact was with the front end of the race car where the engine is housed. So I don't know if that's going to spell out potential aero and possible engine damage for Jeff Crivello or not. Obviously, we're going to have to wait until we go back green, but we could already have one of our playoff contenders in early trouble in the first playoff race.
Yeah, and generally speaking, when incidents like that do occur, as long as it's not a tremendous sort of closing rate, these cars can typically withstand that pretty well. It's when you start running into other cars at higher speeds or getting up into that outside concrete wall that you really have to start to be concerned. So we'll have to see how that plays out for him as the race progresses. Now, we still have a little over 40 laps remaining, so there's time for Crivello to get everything back together and get back toward the front. And that's something that we've seen him do throughout the majority of the season. Sometimes we'll see Crivello, skip a pit stop when everybody else is coming in for gas. Sometimes we'll see him short pit, or just find a way to find his car right at the front of the pack, right when it really matters at the end of the race. And he's done a really good job of that all season long, so don't count him out just yet.
Bob Dixon looks around. He's lost all his friends. Josh Metallic, Joe DeSpirito, Chuck McClure, Seminara, Wesley Nofsker, Ricky, they all came to pit road here under this caution to top off the fuel tank, make it a little bit further. So interesting strategy call. You've got about 6 playoff contenders in that mix that decided to give up the track position, come down pit road, be a little bit further on fuel, but proverbially put themselves back in the hornet's nest.
Absolutely. So we're going to it's going to be really fun to watch those guys come from about mid-pack and work their way back up through this traffic. It's going to get really exciting, that's for sure. But look up front now, like you mentioned, Bob Dixon, he is still leading the pack. We have a very, very hungry Donnie Garrett, a very, very hungry and talented Hank Middleton, and then you've got the 616 of Jerm Lewis sitting back there. Now, Lewis was one of those drivers that came into last week with hopes of making it into the playoffs, but had bad luck all day long. That he would love to get that turned around with a trip to victory lane.
Saw Bernie Mobbs in the 90 make the left-hand turn to pit road. He would have restarted 8th, but he's going to come down and top off the fuel tank. Playoff contender, going to be restarting outside of the top 10. And yeah, it's interesting right now because I remember we were talking about all those playoff contenders up inside the top 10. Now it's looking like as they cross the line, there's only going to be 4 of our playoff contenders up inside of this top 10. So yeah, the thing that we don't talk about as much too, we've been talking about the win you're in system for these playoff contenders, but there's every possibility as well with how unpredictable Talladega is that a non-playoff contender could throw a spanner into the works and force a number of drivers to have to point their way into that Elite 8 by taking a checkered flag here tonight.
Oh, and that there's a couple drivers in particular at the front of the playoff grid that would not be at all opposed to seeing that happen, because that just takes a little bit more of the workload off of them going into race number 2 next week. But again, all of these guys that are non-playoff contenders, do not forget they are still just as hungry to get up there and get the victory as these playoff drivers are to get themselves up there and stay into contention for the championship. Non-playoff drivers, not a whole lot to lose. You're just competing for that 14th spot in the points overall, but you want to be that playoff driver that comes home with the most victories. Gives you a little bit of bragging rights, so to speak.
Bob Dixon is 28th in the overall standings coming into tonight's event, trying to see if he can pick up his first win on the season. And this early caution, this very quick caution, big break for Wiley Coate, a driver that fell 2 laps down. He got one of those laps back with our first caution, and this yellow flag will put him back on the lead lap. So all 36 drivers that took the green to start this race will be on the lead lap when we go back green flag racing, which I believe will be on lap 29. The lights should go out atop the pace card this time around.
See Wiley riding around there on the high line with that Smithfield Bacon Dodge Challenger number 6 car. I got to put a call into Wiley, get my number back from him at some point. But, once he gets back around, gets that lucky dog spot, he gets caught back up to the field, he'll be just fine. We've seen Wiley in contention all season long. Another one of those guys that we know can go out there any week and get one of these victories, just kind of fallen on a lot of bad luck this season. So, lucky dog, he's going to wave around, and we will see this time across the line. As you mentioned, Seth, it looks like, yes, the light's now out atop the Dodge Challenger pace car, and a few more stragglers that opted to come down and top off their fuel, one of them being the number 8 car of Jeremy Jeffries.
I saw someone peel off there. I couldn't tell who it was. So Jeffries, with him coming down pit road, it's really kind of spread out how far some of these drivers can make it as opposed to others. As far as Bob Dixon, it looks like he'll only be able to go maybe another 10 to 12 laps before he'll have to start thinking about coming to pit road. Some of the other drivers back in the field, they wouldn't have to think about coming down pit road until somewhere around maybe lap 60. And in the terms of Jeremy Jeffries, he may not have to be down pit road any earlier than lap 62 or 63. So things looking very interesting here in terms of strategy.
Absolutely. We'll have to see exactly how that's going to play out. So we know it's going to be exciting as we documented it before the last restart. A lot of 3-wide racing before our first incident when guys were coming down to try to make green flag pit stops. Bunch of new faces up front. I'm looking at the field right now, Seth, and it looks like of those guys that pitted earlier, they're going to be starting right around those 8th and 9th positions on the grid. So they've got some traffic that they're going to have to try to work through to get back up front again, and I don't think Garrett, Middleton, or even Bob Dixon and Elliott, for that matter, are going to make it easy for him at all.
And it's incredible how whether it's pit stop strategy or the big one striking, how the front of the field can get a facelift within 5 laps. We were talking earlier on about Hank Middleton and Chris Emery, playoff contenders, starting this race outside of the top 25. Look where they are now. You got Middleton rolling off from 3rd, Emery from 9th place. They've found their way up to the front.
Absolutely. So we'll have to see what these guys can do. Oh, by the way, Billy Ellisor has very quietly crept his way up to that 8th position as well. So keep an eye out for that 26 car. He's going to try to make himself known, as it looks like these guys got themselves pretty well spread out through the tri-oval. They come painfully slow. Not sure exactly what's going on here, but they're nowhere near side by side as the flagger will throw the green flag. Looks like Garrett with a little bit of advantage, but now Bob Dixon being pushed by the 9 of Elliott off into turn number 1.
Like Dixon for the moment will have the advantage. We'll see if that inside line can get formed up. Usually on initial starts and restarts, the inside line gets a big run through 1 and 2. Then the momentum strikes on the top side off of 2 and down the back straightaway. That's where we're seeing Bob Dixon, Chris Elliott, and Rodney Sullins get their momentum. The side-by-side battle for the lead continues into turn 3.
Looks like Donnie Garrett right now with about a half a car length of the 143 of Dixon. He's got help from behind from the 2 of Middleton, the 616 of Jerem Lewis. Now we got a little bit of that middle line sharing that we saw a lot of earlier in the season. The first time we're seeing it tonight, both the middle and top lines, so to speak, sharing that one singular middle line. So now Garrett now continuing to run that middle line. He'll slide up a little bit in front of the 143 and back down in front of the 2 again, down into turn number 1.
Have to chuckle, you talked about that staggered start, the stack up there at that restart. 4 drivers crossed the start-finish line, received black flags for that restart. So race admins having to do a little bit of work in clearing those black flags, as now Garrett will clear for the top position. He's going to have Hank Middleton pushing him. And remember, these two hooked up a few weeks ago when Donnie Garrett finished 2nd place to, I believe the winner of that race was Joe DeSpirito. Middleton almost was able to push the 77 to victory. Oh no! Joe DeSpirito up in the air, several drivers involved. Mallory was the one I saw take the airborne ride, and I'm seeing a lot of playoff contenders in this one.
The 24 of Joe DeSpirito was also upside down. We had the 088 of Novsker upside down. Easily half the field involved in this wreck as these cars will try to pull away. The 8 of Jeffries absolutely destroyed as well. The 711 of Godfrey. Cars destroyed, smoking all over the racetrack. Seth, this is going to completely change the perception of this race, and it looks like maybe...
I'm trying to count this on my fingers. I've got 7 playoff contenders that were involved in this.
And the 222 of Emery, he's out.
Emery is out. Metallic's out. Jeffries is out. You got Bernie Mobbs, Joe DeSpirito, Grant Wesley, and there was another playoff contender I saw involved as well. I believe it was Bernie Mobbs in the 90s. So there's at least 7 of our playoff contenders involved in this one. There may be more.
Just an absolutely massive incident. Gonna try to get a look and see what happened. I believe it happened around the 222 of Emery off of turn number 4. It looked like maybe the 24 of Despirito came up just a little, and the 220 of Mallory down just a little across the nose of the 222, sending Despirito up in the air, Mallory up in the air, Emery well through the air. I think we had 5 or 6 cars easily airborne and flipping over. Seth, the 28 of Mark Paglia involved, the 5 of Sheck involved.
Jeff Crivello got a piece. Some of the barrel rolling cars were Gary Hurst in the 914, Tim Nofsker in the 088. I saw Vorgione get involved. It'd probably be easier to name off the drivers that weren't involved than the drivers that were.
I'll tell you what, the 914 car, he caught air and just about leapt over the entire wreck that was happening underneath him.
Dave Melson, Wayne Pribnow, Bobby Farrell. I mean, the list just goes on and on. John Godfrey.
Seth, I don't know. I don't know if we have maybe an in-car or a roof view from the 914 of Gary Hurst, but I'll tell you what, as they came around turn number 3, Hurst got involved, hit, shot airborne, flew up over about 15 cars before rolling over into the tri-oval.
I think he landed on Dave Melson's car. Might have landed on the rear decklet of his machine. We'll see if we've got that camera angle. Other drivers involved that I noticed there. The 5 of Jason Sheck. We already mentioned Crivello in the 56. Wiley Coate, who had just gotten back on the lead lap. See what the 914 saw, if that camera survived.
One of the wilder rides we've seen. And now we've seen a lot of cars get airborne over the last season or two. Some pretty spectacular flips, but just a sort of Evel Knievel all the way over the wreck before he finally landed awkwardly and did a single barrel roll, slid down in the infield, and then continued on. He is currently still out on the racetrack, so that's a pretty durable race car right there, kids.
Certainly is. I mean, the good news for him, he was up in the air, but he landed back on all 4 wheels, so that might be a reason why he's able to continue. A couple more drivers that were collected up, Mark Paglia in the 28, Jessica Shelton in the 94, and Ken Roberts in the 055. Like I said, I think if we went from first back to maybe around 14th, 15th, those are the drivers that weren't involved in the wreck. Everybody else on that got bits and pieces of that, some of them way more so than others.
Absolutely. So now you've got your leaders up at the front of the pack. Wayne Pribnow, the 00 car, he's now being scored in the lead. I don't believe he's come down into the pits. I believe that may be why, but if you look at those top 3, you've got Pribnow, Garrett, Bob Sumner in the 712, Chris Elliott in the 9, Dante Ricky in the 54. That is your top 5. Those guys all pretty happy that they were out in front of that incident because, as you mentioned, Seth, probably only about 10 to 15 cars without any sizable damage. I'm not sure that there was any car that got involved with that accident coming off of turn 4 there that didn't get some sort of damage out of it, and pretty severe.
As of right now, officially 5 drivers out of the race. 3 of them playoff contenders. Chris Emery scored 32nd, Josh Metallic 33rd. So as we know, coming into this race, it was a win and in scenario, and it was a win or bust scenario for him. So he will not be advancing into the round of 8. John Godfrey will finish 34th, Jason Sheck in 35th, and Jeremy Jeffries, a former winner this season, will be finishing 36th. And I find it so interesting because a stat I was actually going to bring up before that wreck took place. Last season, only 2 Fords made it into the playoffs. Josh Metallic and Mark Paglia, they were both eliminated in the first round. 4 Fords made it into the playoffs this season, already 2 of them in the garage area here in the first playoff race.
Yeah, you hate to see that. And even if you're Jeremy Jeffries, now he came in tonight's race 3rd in points, trailing 12 behind point leader Joe Despirito. Something we've talked about many times the last 4 or 5 weeks, Seth. This point swing for Jeffries could really hurt him. This could put him at the tail end of the top 10. Now, we know, as you mentioned, Metallic, this takes him out. Chris Emery, it's not going to help him any. It could very well take him out as well. So that puts Jeremy Jeffries in a very, very tight spot going into week number 2 next week, Seth. He's definitely going to have his work cut out for him, because if he has another incident like he had tonight, he could very well find himself out of the playoffs at the end of round number 1.
Yeah, if we looked here tonight with putting the cutoff line at 8th position, where everybody's trying to be above next week, Emery came into this race 3 points outside of that cut line. And the big thing too, drivers that have issues here at Talladega, let's say they finish out of the race down around 18th, 19th, 20th. Okay, that's not quite as bad. The fact that we had drivers that are going to be in the race next week, like Emery and Jeffries, finishing outside the top 30, that's going to be a huge points gap they're going to have to overcome.
Absolutely. So, and if we end up having these playoff contenders or even non-playoff contenders, and we have another one blowing up out on the racetrack, I'm not sure who that is toward the tail of the pack.
That's Mallory, the 220.
Laying down a lot of smoke right now. I'll be surprised if it doesn't bring the caution back out, to be honest.
Hopefully it does not.
See the 24 of Despirito right behind him. It looks like his crew has done a lot of work on that 24, but with the amount of damage sustained, you can just look at the body work alone and tell that that car is not quite right. So we'll have to see if Despirito can get that car back up to speed. Now, that's something that we talked about as well for the 24. He had a little bit of insurance through this first round. However, that being said, depending on how bad off his car is, he also doesn't want to take a major point swing, because even if he secures his way into round number 2, if he falls, out of the top 5 in points, even come week number 3 of the playoffs, he could have his work cut out for him trying to make it into the final 4 as well.
Well, the thing of it is, there's no guarantee right now that Joe Despirito is going to advance into the round of 8. He came in only 30 points above 8th in the standings, Bernie Mobbs, and right now he's going to be going back green in the 31st position, 1 lap down. So, if other drivers that are trying to catch him for the points lead, like Bob Seminara, who's leading us back to the green flag, Joe Despirito could find himself down near the cut line going into next week. That's why he's out there logging these laps, just in case some of his other playoff contenders run into some issues in these final 30 laps.
Absolutely. And if you think back to season number 51 in the playoffs, had it not been for bonus points and wins for Joe Despirito, he had some bad luck in the playoffs last season, but those bonus points were the only thing that kept him in, ultimately helping him to win that championship. So we'll have to keep an eye on him as he's well off the pace off of turn number 2. On the backstretch, however, Bob Seminara, Donnie Garrett, they are well up to pace, racing side by side off into turn number 3.
Like Todd Mallory did make it back to pit road to his stall. Unfortunately, the caution did not come out for him, possibly laying down some debris after his engine going south on the back straightaway. Up at the front, though, still that side-by-side. Dante Ricky, who probably had one of the best avoidances of the playoff contenders there, was able to get down to the apron to avoid the wreck. He's now pushing Donnie Garrett to the front. He's looking for 3 wins in a row. I don't think I have looked far enough back in the record books to see if that's ever been done in the Tally Challenge.
No, I wouldn't put him past him to be able to do it. Now, Seth, I think if he were to be able to come out here and accomplish that feat, 3 wins in a row, the previous 2 of which got him into the playoffs, I think this would be a statement win if he could get the 3rd win in a row and lock himself into the 2nd round in the playoffs. Now, we know how hungry Dante Ricky is out there and how bad he wants it, but, it just hasn't worked out for him the last couple seasons. So I think he's here, and I think he's serious about it, and we see that right now. He's pushing the 77 of Donnie Garrett real hard now into the tri-oval.
A lot of times we talk about momentum in these type of races, this type of series. Well, Dante Ricky has just that. Last 3 starts, 2nd, victory lane, victory lane. And right now he's in the 2nd position behind the 77. Rodney Sullins and Jerm Lewis, a couple of non-playoff contenders now in P3 and P4.
Absolutely, and we see that 616. We've seen Germ Lewis be very quick and very competitive. However, we've also seen the 222 and 616 struggle a little bit when they haven't had each other to bounce off of out on the racetrack. But right now, 616 Germ Lewis putting on a solid showing in fourth right now after just missing the playoff grid last week. So now we look behind him just a little bit. Glenn Harris having an excellent run running in that fifth position. Richard Martin has just gotten by that inside line to clear for the sixth position across the line. Bob Seminara now continuing to fall back on that bottom line.
Yeah, no friends for the 712. Now he's going to lose Chris Elliott, who jumps up behind Terry Bombard. Looks like we will have another driver officially out of the race now. Todd Mallory's team trying to do all they could to get him back out there, but they have pushed him back to the garage area. He'll finish in 31st. And now we're starting to get the idea of the drivers that sustained damage from that big wreck out of turn 4, who's still up to speed and who is not. Some of the drivers that might have avoided near disaster: Dave Melson, Jessica Shelton, and playoff contender Grant Wesley all look like still in the draft, that they are up to speed and still in the hunt.
Absolutely, and that's all you need at the end of the day, is you need to keep yourself in contention until the checkered flag. Even if you don't have the fastest car on the track and maybe you can't get that win, points, they count for everything. Right now at the front of the pack, the 77, 54, and 38 of Sullins, man, I'll tell you what, they've got a 3-car draft going right now that I'm not sure the 616 of Germ Lewis can even catch the rear bumper of the 38 of Sullins, because they are just a freight train hauling off down the back straightaway.
And he's got a little bit of daylight between him and the front bumper of the Krispy Kreme Chevrolet of Glenn Harris. That starts to close up a little bit, but that's certainly not going to help Germ Lewis to be able to latch on to this top 3, because he doesn't have a push from behind.
Absolutely, but now as we see them out of turn number 4, it looks like he has snuck up just a little bit. So now it's the Harris machine in the 08 who has a slight gap between himself and Germ Lewis. Now looking a little bit farther back, Bob Seminara is doing all that he can on that bottom line. I just don't think he's had any opportunity to get up into that middle line. There's still, you know, the Middleton machine right behind him trying to give him just a little bit of help, but there's nothing that they can do. No daylight above them, as you see the leaders bypass the 24 of Despirito, who has to be easily 30 to 40 miles per hour off pace.
Looks like 26 drivers, 26 drivers are in this lead group. Other drivers that damaged too much and they are losing the draft: Wayne Pribnow, Tim Nofsker, and another playoff contender, the 90 of Bernie Mobbs, now finds himself 18 seconds behind race leader Donnie Garrett. So that's 5 playoff contenders now that are going to be in a rather dangerous position heading into next week, especially Bernie Mobbs, because he came into this race 8th in the playoff standings.
Yeah, and I think the common theme here is we're seeing guys that we really needed to have, you know, at least decent nights, just not be able to get through that wreck that happened. And that one really was a doozy, happening about mid-pack. Took out a lot of really good cars, and in retrospect, Seth, we did say after that last round of pit stops, it's going to be interesting to see those leaders work their way back up through the pack after being, you know, a little bit behind from those pit stops, and that was exactly what we were afraid might happen to them, and it certainly did.
A couple of drivers that looked like they were going to be able to stay with the lead pack are now starting to lose touch. Ken Roberts and Gary Hurst. I'm just impressed the fact that 914 is still out there on the racetrack and still on the lead lap after we saw his Boeing 747 take flight off of turn 4.
Well, as aerodynamic as that a car appeared to be through midair, it's not a whole much of a surprise to see it's still able to run out there on the racetrack. We saw it barrel rolled that one time, but didn't look to be too badly damaged, and he's still out there right now. But I'll tell you what, Seth, these guys really trying to make some moves up toward the front of the pack, but it seems like whenever one guy tries to make a move, somebody else will go out to help him. Nobody else willing to right now. So that middle line really dominant. Everybody just kind of cruising around right now. Nobody looking to make any major moves, but I guess it's pretty understandable as they work their way, you know, hopefully to the next round of green flag pit stops.
Well, that's how a big wreck can really change the landscape of the type of racing we're going to see. These drivers were 3 wide, 9, 10 rows deep at the start. That's because 37 drivers had taken the green flag. Now we've only got about maybe 23 drivers that are fully up to speed here. The fewer cars you have in a pack, the harder it is for a group around 5th, 6th, 7th to be able to generate a run to challenge the front of the field when they're running single file.
Absolutely, and not to mention the damage that some of these machines sustain. Now, I got to tell you what, give a shout out to Jessica Shelton in that 94 car after being involved in that last wreck. She's up to 8th place right now, and that just tells you how much of an equalizer the draft really can be as long as you play your cards right. She's looking pretty stout here as they come across the line to complete lap number 44.
And keep an eye on Grant Wesley because he's kind of riding the same story that Joe DeSpirito did 1 year ago. Comes into the playoffs winless. DeSpirito got his first win in the first race of the playoffs. Could Grant Wesley do the same? He did sustain damage from that wreck. That big one had a lot of damage around the left rear quarter panel, but they've gotten that pretty well buffered out, and right now he's holding down the 10th position.
Well, and it kind of makes you wonder, Seth, if maybe that's not part of the reason that some of these cars a little farther back aren't really making moves, because they know their cars may not be quite up to speed with what the leaders are right now. So if you do make that move and find yourself outside of the draft, you can fall back relatively quickly. And we saw, as was the case with Bob Seminara and Hank Middleton, these guys very unforgiving. If you get out of line, nobody's going to give you room to get back in again.
Yeah, remember when we were talking about all the playoff contenders up at the front, and I said more than likely we're going to have that same scenario at the end of the race? Well, I might have to amend my statement. We've only got 3 of them up inside of the top 10 right now, and only 4 of them inside of the top 15.
And absolutely, look who that leader is, though. That's 77 of Donnie Garrett, who has preached consistency all season long. Now with great pushes from the 54 of Dante Ricky. He's another one of those drivers like Grant Wesley that comes in here without a win on the season, without a win in the last 2 seasons, as a matter of fact. So how cool would that be for the 77 machine to finally be able to break that winning streak playoff week number 1?
A lot of drivers don't really come into a super speedway race with any expectations. They play it by ear based on the scenario and the cars around them. Donnie Garrett is one of those few drivers that has a game plan going in. We talked to him multiple times. His first goal was to make sure he made his way into the playoffs. He was very disappointed he wasn't part of the postseason last year. His second goal, top 5 and top 10 him to death, he would say. But now I think his goals may have changed. He's realized a lot of his playoff contenders are either damaged or out of this race. He's only got a handful of playoff drivers to contend with, and he's got a shot of advancing into the round of 8.
Absolutely, and he's one of those drivers that we talked about earlier in the race. You know, when we said there's a lot to be lost, but there's also a lot to be gained. For Donnie Garrett, should he be able to continue on, and would he be able to pull off this win with the playoff contenders that we already know are in jeopardy because of that last big wreck? Garrett could be one of those guys with a lot to be gained here, and how cool would that be to see him break that winless streak? As we see now, everybody's still pretty single file right back through the about 13th to 14th position. Just a moment ago, I saw the 88 of Grant Wesley try to make a move around the 38 of Dave Melson. Didn't seem to pay off, and now they're just kind of drafting together down the back straightaways. It's now Jessica Shelton with the help of the 9 of Chris Elliott trying to get that upper middle lane going out of turn number 4.
As I said, when that big wreck occurred, it was probably going to be easier to name off the drivers that weren't involved and the drivers that were, and I don't think I even named off all the drivers that were involved here. The 17 of Chuck McClure, the 26 of Billy Elliser, I don't remember seeing them get involved in that wreck, but you can see that they're having some trouble making some forward progress, so they might have gotten slight pieces of that incident as well.
Absolutely, that's a very real possibility. The other thing that Chuck McClure has really struggled on this season, not so much in the Tally Challenge, but across all the other series at RTG, pit road speeding penalties. So we see he's making some moves down the backstretch as he looks to the inside of the 2 of Middleton. His car looks to be pretty well up to speed, so not sure if it was indeed involved in that wreck or if he may have just had a pit road speeding mishap or something of the likes, because right now it looks like his car is running pretty good off the floor.
Going back to your point about Chuck McClure and pit road, yeah, it's actually been here in the Tally Challenge as well that he's been hit with a couple of speeding penalties as recent as a late green flag pit stop last week. So Chuck McClure is certainly hoping that if we end up making this final pit stop under green flag conditions, that he's able to nail it and not have to come back down pit road, giving up a solid finishing position late in this race. Up at the front, it still remains single file. Donnie Garrett, Dante Ricky, Rodney Sullins, and Jerm Lewis. They've been the top 4 for the last 10 laps or so. The thing right now that we have to kind of bear in mind is Donnie Garrett. Who is he working with to come down pit road with him? Because he's been out in front here now for 17 laps. He's using up the most fuel. He's going to have to come down pit road earlier than a number of the other drivers behind him.
Absolutely. It's going to be something that's going to be really interesting to see, because we've heard him preach, along with top 5, top 10s all season long, the fact that unlike a lot of these other drivers out here on the racetrack, he has no teammates. So when he's trying to strategize and plan all these things out in his head, he's trying to think of ways to do it around the competitors around him as well, because he knows he's got nobody to work with. So he's going to do the best that he can to try to make sure that he's cognizant of what's going on with his competitors as well. Right now, Joe DeSpirito real slow in the middle of the back straightaway. I thought the 08 of Glenn Harris was going to hit him hard, but just narrowly avoided that as they continue on through turns number 3 and 4.
Not sure. We might see some drivers duck into pit road this lap. I saw, looked like the chat bar might have been flashing. Nope, they're all going to stay out an extra lap. One thing that I noticed here too, Joe DeSpirito, we were talking about why is he staying out even though his car is way off the pace. I mean, there's no contest in the speed these drivers are turning and the speed he's turning, as we saw when they went around him. Well, every position, every point matters. He's a lap away from picking up the 29th position off of Mike Rogers, who just brought his car to the garage area. So Joe DeSpirito, despite the fact that he may be multiple laps down, he's still trying to gain points whatever way he can.
Not sure what is going on with the DeSpirito machine right now, and I believe the DeSpirito machine is out of it.
And we got some drivers that were just on pit road. Gary Hurst in the 914, Wiley Coate in the 6, and I'm hearing some drivers are pitting now. Here they come. Race leader is in, Donnie Garrett. He's got Dante Ricky, Richard Martin. Oh, we got a wreck. Perry Bond, Grant Wesley, Hank Middleton, and Mark Pegley at the entrance of pit road.
No yellow flag as of yet. Still under green. A couple really hard shots taken. Still no yellow flag, but there is going to be if the car on the infield doesn't get moving right now, which it finally does, but it's still stalled out down there. I wouldn't be surprised if that brings out a yellow. Not sure why it's just sitting there. And there it goes down onto pit road now.
Paglia and Middleton got the worst end out of that deal. Grant Wesley and Perry Bond for sure have gotten some damage also as it turns the race lead over to Rodney Sullins. So the first group didn't really make it onto pit road clean. Let's see about group number 2.
Absolutely. But Dante Ricky, I'll tell you what, he's got a pretty sizable lead over the 77 of Garrett coming off of pit road. They now merge up out onto the racing surface. It looks like the top 5 car.
No, we got a wreck on pit road. Mark Paglia, Jessica Shelton got together. I think Paglia was coming out. Shelton was coming in. Now Hank Middleton has to go around the both of them.
And it looks like the Paglia machine after that may be done for the day. It looks like Shelton has gotten her car into her box.
And I believe Terry Bombard had an issue getting onto pit lane. He took it rather wide. I think he hit the commitment line, but he did go out into the grass. So we'll have to see if he'll still be able to take service and not receive a penalty for that. This looks like the area where the race lead would cycle around. Dante Ricky, who was second coming in, is going to be the leader coming out. Donnie Garrett, who was the leader coming in, he's going to be second coming out.
Absolutely, and these guys are just going to absolutely blow by these cars coming off of turn number 2. So I tell you what, that first group and that second group, both with issues coming on to pit road, but I think it's definitely going to be the first group with a huge advantage because Joe DeSpirito currently leading that second group with the help of the 26 of Elliser. But the closest cars behind them are still about 6 or 7 car lengths back. So these top 6 easily going to pull away from those 4 cars behind them. Seminara now hoping for a yellow to get caught back up. Dante Ricky, on the other hand, he's hoping things stay exactly the way that they are as he's got Donnie Garrett pushing him across the line in the lead.
Right now you've got 6 cars up in this lead group, 5 of them on the lead lap. They're actually going to leave the lap machine car of Gary Hurst out to dry. So you've got 3 playoff contenders up here in the top 5, the 2 X Factors, non-playoff drivers, the 43 Richard Martin right now in 3rd, and Jerm Lewis in the 616 in 4th.
Chuck McClure, though, what a comeback story for Chuck, as you had documented. He had to come from the back. He is currently going to be scored in the 5th position. So right now, as it stands, Martin and Lewis looking to play spoiler, as it looks like what was 6 cars now going to dwindle down to 5 as they come in through the tri-oval.
And we saw Hank Middleton had his issue on pit road after he got spun to the infield grass and then had that contact trying to get around Mark Pagley and Jessica Shelton, which slowed him even more. He's just gone a lap down. So right now, 23 drivers, now make it 22 drivers on the lead lap, as Ken Roberts just got put -1.
Absolutely, and off of turn number 2 now. Garrett keeps making little looks around Dante Ricky, but not willing to commit. Richard Martin, he was going to try to make a move down the back straightaway, but poking his nose out of line, that's going to get him into trouble. So now put Jerm Lewis up to 3rd position with the 17 of McClure up to 4th. We'll have to see, can Martin maintain this draft, as it looks like with Martin falling back just a little bit, that's going to help the 914 machine, and in turn also help the 712 of Seminara. So in just a couple more laps, Seth, I think we're going to see Seminara and Billy Elliser right back in this thing again.
Well, let's not forget, we talk a lot about Bernie Mobbs, Bob Seminara, Joe DeSpirito as the Florida boys. Let's not forget, Richard Martin is one of the Florida boys as well, so he could have somebody in the form of Bob Seminara to be able to hook up with here late.
Absolutely. And in turn, on the flip side of that coin, that could give Bob Seminara somebody to hook up with late. Is, we've seen late in these races, it's usually the 24-712, the 24-90, the 90-712, one of those combinations working together to get up there and get those wins. So we'll have to see. As you see the 914, he's now going to duck just a little bit low. Not sure if he was trying to give room to the Seminara and Elliser machines here, but that's definitely not going to help those cars maintain that draft. Again, Richard Martin going to take a peek just a little bit high, see if he can get a run on the 17 of McClure, but off into turn number 1, still single file is that top 5.
7 drivers in this lead group on the lead lap, and then it's about 6 seconds before you get back to Terry Bombard, John Forgione, and others that are in this second group, and they're actually racing side by side, so that is not going to help their cause in trying to run down that top 7. Drivers that had some issues for playoff contenders with that green flag pit stop, one of them right there going a lap down, Grant Wesley, all the way back now in the 21st position. We already documented that Hank Middleton had an issue. 13 drivers started tonight with hopes of advancing into the round of 8. Only 6 of them right now are even up in the vicinity of the top 10. Dante Ricky and Donnie Garrett 1st and 2nd. Chuck McClure in 4th. Bob Seminara in 6th. Billy Elliser in 7th. Then you got to go all the way back to 14th place where you find Jeff Crivello, who's a part of that second group.
Absolutely. And Jeff Crivello, as we mentioned earlier, just keeping his car out there on the racetrack, that with all these other playoff contenders having a little bit of issue, you say, oh boy, he's in 14th position, but it's much better to be in 14th position than it is to be back in the 30s. As now we see Chuck McClure, he's going to try to make a run in that upper middle line. He's going to get help from the 43 of Martin as well as that 914 car, but Bob Seminara, he's not going to help them. Neither is Billy Elliser. So I think those 3 cars are going to be stuck on an island, 5 cars to the advantage on the inside line.
Donnie Garrett keeps peeking like he wants to jump up there, but he's waiting to see what kind of momentum that top side can possibly get. Out of the drivers up in this lead pack, 5 of them are playoff contenders. 4 of them have been to victory lane. The only one that hasn't, second place, Donnie Garrett.
Absolutely. And Jerm Lewis, he was going to try to look to make a run on that low side, but Bob Seminara, he was not going to go with him either. Bob Seminara is committed to that middle line right now. As you see, he's going to have the advantage over Lewis heading off into turn number 3. So now your top 5 off of turn 4, Ricky, Garrett, McClure, Martin, and the 712 of Seminara. Elliser also going to get around the 616 machine. The 616 and the 914, they're now going to be the final 2 cars in this lead draft. So you look look at these top 5 right now, Seth, with the exception of Richard Martin, all of our playoff drivers starting to get it together here with just 7 laps remaining.
These drivers are good to make it on fuel. It's now just who's going to be first back to the checkered flag. Chuck McClure and Richard Martin, while that outside line didn't get them up there to battle for the lead, it did allow them to pick up a couple of spots there, putting them in 3rd and 4th. So if they wanted to step out of line and make a run, at least they're closer to the front to be able to do so. But you just kind of get the feeling, Dante Ricky and Donnie Garrett, they've been working together. They've swapped the positions since the green flag pit stop, but they've been hooked up to each other ever since we went back green flag racing. The question is, though, when does the alliance come to an end? When does Donnie Garrett say, all right, Dante, appreciate the help, but now you're on your own?
And, you know, I was just wondering that exact same thing, Seth. But then, again, the other thing I'm wondering, if Donnie Garrett does try to make that move on Ricky, will anybody help the Garrett machine? Because if Garrett makes a move and none of those drivers behind him go to help him, Garrett would then be out on a night. And it looks like Chuck McClure, with the move that he's making off of turn number 2, he's not looking to help anybody except himself.
Let's see if Richard Martin can help propel that outside line. Do they have anybody else that's going to go up there and help? Nope. Bob Seminara stays low. Billy Elliser stays low. As a matter of fact, Seminara got a heck of a run down the back straightaway. He shoves Donnie Garrett right up to the back bumper of the McDonald's Ford.
Absolutely. And Seminara is committed to that middle line while other drivers are making moves. He knows, I'm going to just stay in this line where my draft is consistent and make my way back up to the front. That is exactly what he's going to do, this time across the line. 5 more laps to go. Ricky, still your leader. Looks like Garrett in second with Seminarin in third before you get to your first side-by-side of Billy Elliser, who has now gotten past the 17 of McClure and Richard Martin, who will now fall back behind the Jerm Lewis machine off of turn 4.
Bob Seminara, a former Tally Challenge champion back in season 49, trying to advance into the Final Four to be a 2-time champ, along with the likes of Brian Schilling and his teammate Joe DeSpirito, as it's going to come down now to this point in time for these drivers, because if we get back to the start-finish line, next flag will end the race, whether it be the white flag or the caution flag.
Absolutely. So we're going to have to see how this is going to play out. Again, McClure looking to the inside with the help of Martin underneath the 26 of Elliser. But again, no help. We'll see. Can they get a little bit of a run going into turn 1? No, they cannot. The top 4 now checking out from that inside line. Jerm Lewis now, who has not quite gotten up onto the back bumper of the 26 of Elliser. The 17 and 43, they lost a lot of ground coming through 1 and 2 this time. However, the flip side of that's going to be once they get back into the draft and up to speed around the tri-oval area, Seth, they may have a tremendous run in comparison to the drivers ahead of them.
You know, we were asking about the question of when Donnie Garrett makes a move. Well, let's think like Donnie Garrett, because he's told us a lot of times what his strategy is when he's out there on the track, thinking in terms of points, thinking in terms of positions. Right now, you've got 7 drivers up in this lead group. They've got 13 seconds between them and that second group. So if you're Donnie Garrett and you're thinking, all right, the worst I can finish is 7th place if I make a move maybe off turn 4, and if I reckon I'm able to make it back to the start-finish line ahead of that lead group, probably turn 4 to the tri-oval is where Donnie Garrett would think about making that move on the final lap.
I would have to think that's absolutely the case, as there's now just 2.5 more laps remaining. Seminara is all over the back bumper, that 77 of Garrett. However, this could be a game changer. These leaders coming up on a bunch of lap traffic. The first car will be the 2 of Middleton, who is currently occupying that middle line. He'll slide up the track. Right in front of them, 3 more cars. Going to be the Sullins machine leading that pack. These leaders are going to have to contend with this about turn 1, turn 2, and the yellow flag is out. Ricky wins.
He is going to win. The timing of the yellow literally about 100 feet before the start-finish line, and he's going to get his 3rd win in a row is Dante Ricky. What
Certainly
happened?
Unexpected. Something involving
Wesley.
The 88 of Wesley. There was another car at the bottom of 3 and 4 as well. Didn't catch which car that was, but ladies and gentlemen, that's your race. Dante Ricky,
Bond,
3 in a row.
In the 60 that might have been involved with Grant, because he's slow on the front straightaway.
Trying to get an idea of what might have happened right now. Not really sure. Looked like maybe something started around the 143 of Bob Dixon heading off into turn number 3. Looked like the Perry Bond machine might have gotten into his rear end after the 38 of Melson checked up just a little bit. Collecting the 88 of Wesley. Wesley, just an innocent bystander in this accident. His bad day not improving much. The good news is he will at least finish. It's not going to be a great finish, but right now scoring showing him in the 24th position.
This was the second group of race cars from about 8th place on back where this contact occurred. Double and 3 wide, coming proverbially to the white flag, but with the caution coming out, this race is going to be over. And we're actually going to go and take a look on board with the 54 of Dante Ricky and see if we can find the caution lights coming on, because it couldn't have been any more than 3 car lengths by the timing that the caution came out and Dante Ricky's nose hit the start-finish line.
Yeah, I think it was just about the exit of the tri-oval, as you mentioned, coming to the start-finish line, right about where the curve of the tri-oval ends. I saw the movement of the flagger's hand and looked and saw that it was the yellow flag. So what was shaping up to be a rather exciting finish kind of just the book closed on us a little bit prematurely there, Seth, but Dante Ricky, he'll take it. He's
Right
not
there.
going to argue with 3 in a row.
No, absolutely not. Right there is where the caution came out. It was about the second caution light before the start-finish line. And the thing of it is, too, obviously elation for Dante Ricky, but frustration for some of the guys behind him, because with that caution coming out, there's no way you can generate a run in that short a span of space.
No, there was absolutely nothing. With the way that the cars were lined up single file through the tri-oval there was no time. There was no time for anybody to try to make a move. So Donnie Garrett, he's going to bring it home with another second place finish. Bob Seminary, he's going to be happy with a third. Billy Elliser was able to hang on for that 4th spot. Now, again, ladies and gentlemen, pending official review, this is all unofficial as they work their way through turns number 3 and 4. Dante Ricky's probably loosening up those straps, and I tell you what, he's got to be absolutely elated in that driver's seat. Just 3 or 4 weeks ago, Ricky looked like he probably wouldn't even make the playoffs, and now with 3 consecutive victories, he's already locked into playoff round number 2.
He missed the very first race of the season and then had luck in race 2, which put him into that deficit you were just talking about. But a strong showing, a strong series of showings in the closing stages of the regular season. And as you said, the sigh of relief is going to be huge inside of that number 54 McDonald's Ford, as Dante Ricky at a measly 70 miles per hour is going to pull up alongside of that Big Evil Designs pace car, and he has locked himself into the round of 8. He takes the checkers in race 10.
What a cool story for Dante Ricky. Of course, we know we're usually familiar with him and his number 84 Subway Toyota. Took over the reins of Robbie Nisus's number 50 Ford McDonald's Ford after Nisus came off of surgery. And congratulations, 54. Slide down the banking on your roof.
Burnouts? Yes, he will.
Yeah, he'll be able to make it back around again. But Billy Elliser giving him a little bit of congratulations there, getting roughed up a bit. But I don't think Ricky's complaining about it. The race is all over. It doesn't matter if he's over on his roof now or not. He's just going to drive it backwards to the start-finish line for those burnouts.
Oh, remember the statistic I brought out about the fact that 2 Fords made the playoffs last season and none of them advanced into the round of 8? Well, change your tune this season. A blue oval is the first entry into the next round of the playoffs.
Tell you what, and with as much bad luck as a lot of these drivers at the front of the playoff grid coming into tonight's race had, with a 4th place finish, that's going to be sitting pretty well for Billy Elliser in that number 26 Ford, another driver who we saw even last season work tremendously hard to point his way as far through the playoffs as he could, and again, we're seeing it pay off dividends for him.
2 things that played a factor into Dante Ricky winning here tonight. That big wreck off of turn 4, but I think even more importantly, pit road. That round of green flag pit stops at the end put him from 2nd to 1st, leading us up here to that point of no return. And the timing of the caution working out for him. I think pit road played as much a factor into Dante winning this race here tonight as anything else.
Absolutely. So, Robbie Nisus, he's at home watching this race, a very happy car owner of that number 54. Dante Ricky, though, he's gonna blow up one of your motors there, Robbie. And I thought I was gonna let go as Dante's car just kind of lost RPM there, but he is gonna make it back to pit road here. So I don't know, Seth. Kind of disappointed to see it end under yellow for what it was building up to be. But then again, we had so many other storylines that transpired throughout the course of the night. It was just kind of one of those really strange Talladega nights.
But it underlies something that we always say at the super speedways: right place, right time, because you never know what kind of a scenario you're going to come away with. It could be a fuel strategy race where your tank is nearly empty coming back to the start finish line. It could be 3 wide photo finish to the checkered flag, or in this case, it could be just the final 100, 200 feet to the start finish line, the timing of a caution that's going to pick you up a victory. And there are going to be some very happy drivers heading into that elimination race. 6 of our playoff contenders are going to finish up inside of the top 8 and could, obviously Dante Ricky's locked in, but I'm looking at guys like Garrett, Seminara, you mentioned Elliser, McClure, and Jeff Crivello. These could be some of the guys that also could have a little bit more alleviation heading into that elimination race.
Absolutely. And with the point swings that we're going to see after tonight's race, and as many of those playoff contenders as we saw swept up in those accidents, man, that could play a big factor for them, because that could potentially take some of these guys out of contention for the playoffs. And just look at the 56 of Jeff Crivello, was caught up in 2 early incidents earlier in the race. And man, just by being patient and putting himself, as you said, right place, right time, brings home another top 10 finish. And it's very similar to what we saw Jess Shelton be able to accomplish last season.
And you would think with as big a field as we had here tonight, you'd have drivers that did well, drivers that did all right, and drivers that didn't do well. No, you've got drivers that did well and drivers that didn't do well, because you go down from Jeff Crivello all the way down to 21st is where you find the next playoff contender in Grant Wesley. You got Hank Middleton down there that finished off the lead lap, Bernie Mobbs who finished off the lead lap. Joe DeSpirito actually finished out of the race in the 29th position. He actually didn't pick up a couple of positions there late due to some connection problems. And then, as we've already documented, getting involved in that big wreck, guys like Chris Emery, Josh Metallic, and Jeremy Jeffries out of the race. I mean, there's drivers that have really leapt in the points, and there's drivers that are going to be in a big hole when we get to next week.
Absolutely. And I think one of the biggest heartbreak stories is knowing that Josh Metallic wasn't going to be able to make week number 2 of the playoffs, and he had to come out here and get a win. He was a serious contender earlier in the night, up until that big wreck that happened off of turn number 4 as a result of the leaders being at the back of the pack, trying to make their way back up through to the front again. He looked like he might be able to secure that victory to lock himself into round number 2, but heartbreak for Josh tonight. Jeremy Jeffries, another one who ended up at the very last position on the field. Jeremy came in, as we documented earlier, 3rd place in the points. So these are going to be big stories, as well as the 222 of Chris Emery, Joe DeSpirito. Hopefully these guys can get a little bit better luck next week, or else they may find themselves out prematurely.
Absolutely. That cut line is going to be a lot of fun to watch, to see how it moves up and down depending on who's running where in those 66 laps next week. But let's see if we can now go down trackside, get a word with some of our top 3 finishers, playoff contenders all, and we'll kick things off with our 3rd place finisher here tonight, and possibly new points leader of the playoff standings heading to next week, Bob Seminara. Hey Bob, it's Zach and Seth up here in the FRM booth. You got us?
Yeah, I got you guys.
Oh man, we obviously wanted to see what would have happened if this race finished under green. I'm sure you did as well, but there were only 7 of you as far as lead lap cars up there in that lead group. You had to really find alliances up there if you were going to go, somebody willing to go with you. I know that even as early as that point, you guys were formulating strategies to try and make a move, either with 2 laps to go, maybe even as late as the white flag lap. Did you have anybody you've been able to work an alliance with, and when was that move going to be made?
Yeah, I mean, I was working on the positioning there. I was going to go last lap. I think Billy may have gone with me. We hooked up there after that last pit stop, so I was hoping he would, and probably would have been a scramble up front there.
Now, we talked about how, in terms of scramble, that big wreck, it really scrambled up the field. For you, how did that change up your strategy? Because I know that you were working with a number of drivers in the first half of this race, and suddenly they're damaged and off the pace or out of this event. So, how difficult is it for a driver to adapt now to having different drivers around you and having to form new alliances?
Yeah, it's really crazy. And I took my medicine a couple of times, was stuck on the bottom, went to the back, and I think there Joe had dove to the bottom. I went with him, and I don't know, that third lane, something happened up there, and we all got together. I mean, I just burped it a little bit, and Joe got caught up, and I was able to clear it. Yeah, then it was a different group of guys, with everybody damaged. I hated to see that, but it made it interesting. And then we had that late pit stop too, green flag stop. So it was fun. I think I passed the most cars. I went to the back a couple of times.
Hey Bob, great run. That third place position definitely gonna give you a little bit of boost in the playoff points heading into week number 2. Now I've got to ask you, you did just mention that last round of green flag pit stops that went out on the racetrack. Now it looked like as you guys came off, there was quite a gap between yourselves and the lead cars that had pitted the lap before you. Was there any concern that you'd be able to catch back up to those guys?
Yeah, there was a lot of concern. I probably should have pitted with them, but between guys coming out of the pits and I think Gary was in between us. He helped a little bit. I had Billy right there. We were able to use those cars that got between us to catch up, and it was on from there. I mean, congrats to Dante. 3 in a row. That don't happen hardly ever that I've seen. But yeah, it was fun.
Now, something that I noticed that you were doing that I kind of commended you on throughout that last run before that yellow flag came out is it seemed like you were just hard committed to that middle line. Whenever anybody would try to make a run up low or down to that bottom groove, you would just kind of take advantage of that, keep your line where you were, maintain the draft of the cars in front of you, and bypass those. Was that something that was a conscious effort, or did you just feel that that was the fastest way to get to the front?
Yeah. Then I think we needed to hold that line, and that would have held off all the challenges. And I was hoping till probably one to go. So that's what Billy did good. He stayed up in the same groove as me, and that made it hard for the other guys to get up there, mix it up. And yeah, caution came out at a bad time for us. We couldn't make the move we wanted to, but that was fun, and I'll take top 5.
All right, third place again. Congratulations, Bob. Thank you. Shout out sponsors. What do you got for us tonight?
Yeah, thank you guys. FRN, RTG, David Cannon helping me out with. I've had some connection problems. He's always there for us. My bro up in New Fairfield, Connecticut, and all the D's at work, and Mobs Motors, Joe and Bernie, and my son that really did cleaning the computer, and I didn't have any issues tonight. Thank you. I'll see you next week.
That's Bob Seminara, third place here tonight at Talladega in the first race of the playoffs, and will be sitting in a very comfortable position heading into the elimination race next week. Let's see if we can get our second place finisher, Donnie Garrett. Hey, Donnie, it's Zach and Seth up here in the FRN booth. You got us?
Woo! What's up?
Ric Flair has entered the building, folks. Donnie, second place here tonight. You're going to be in a very good position heading into the second race of the first round, I should say, here of the playoffs. You've always had that moniker, top 5 and top 10 them to death, but you were so close to being in position to win this race. How gutted were you when that caution came out when it did?
So frustrating. But I tell you, I wasn't going to leave Dante. I mean, he if you go back there a little ways in that race, he followed me. He could have dumped me several times, and he didn't. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for guys like that want to work together and stay together. And when I got behind him there, I was just going to stay with him. I mean, we had a couple take shots at us, and I just stayed with him. And I got him 3 in a row, man. That's impressive. That's a very tough feat. Some guys don't have 3 wins in a career over, on Thursday nights, and he's got 3 in a row. So congratulations to Dante for that. But hey, man, second place, put me second place in the points, man. I am pumped. This is what I needed. And tell you what, just you got to keep going here. Got to keep doing it. I almost pitted and topped off on that one caution where all the leaders went in and I stayed out and took the lead. And I'm like, man, that's probably going to be a smart move. And all them guys, my other guys got caught up in that deal. And but I hate that for them. But man, just yeah, it's all about luck sometimes. And like I say, I stayed out and was able to capitalize off of it.
Yeah, talking about that wreck, it's been a while since we've seen a wreck as big as that one. It's been a few weeks, and you were up ahead of it. Now, with having this good run here tonight, does it kind of change your strategy going into next week? I know obviously you're going to try and be up there in the top 5 and top 10 again, but with knowing that that big one could be looming, with drivers trying to make desperate moves to advance their way into the round of 8 as well, does it change the mentality just a little bit going into that elimination race?
Well, you jump. You got to get the old calculator out and got to start doing some numbers. So I think I'm 10 back, and then I'm going to have to wait and see what the review calls for. See, anyone was in a wreck that may have caused one didn't pit or whatever, and look at the points and say, okay, the worst case scenario here, what can happen? And you have to race from that. You have to say, okay, this is my box I'm in, and this is how I have to race now. If I'm like, look, if I finish dead last, I'm going to be 7th in the points. I'm going to go for it. But if there's a chance that I could fall outside that top 8, hey, it's just like tonight, man. Just stay in there, stay tight, get on to the next round. Let's get to the next round, and make friends along the way, like with Dante tonight. And maybe that'll pay dividends, a couple weeks from now. But like I say, man, I'm right on line with what I want. And like I say, we did a good job tonight. And second place, man. God, I don't know how many second places I've had this season. It's got to be 3, 4, 5. I don't know.
Nature Boy, Zach up in the booth. Hey, man, good talking to you. Good second place finish as always. You did just mention you looked at, like, unofficially right now, you are going to be second in points, 10 points out of first. However, 19 points over that cut line. So does this change your mentality? Does it change your outlook going into next week? Or are you just going to go in doing, comfortably what you've done all season long with your old moniker of top 5 and top 10 them to death?
Just watch them. You watch the guys. I saw when Joe got knocked out tonight. I saw Jeremy. I saw the guys when they started falling. That I'm watching that. There's so much, like we talked about before. There's so much math going on in our heads as we're driving, and a lot of other things. You're calculating. Okay, he went out. This guy's way back in the pack. Right now, do I need to take that chance for a win and maybe get in a wreck? That's what you got to avoid. You don't want to go. You don't want to be running second, go for a win, you get blocked and thrown up into the wall. Next thing you know, you're 35th. You can't have that. That cannot happen. So you got to run safe, and you got to get to that Final Four. Now, Final Four, that's going to get pretty wild if you can make it to there. But we got a long way to go. It's still anybody's game here, and we're pretty solidly in. But like I say, one bad move next week, and I could be sitting right back there in 8th or 9th place.
So yeah, you just touched on it a little bit, and that's going to bring me to my next point, and maybe a little bit more difficult a question. What do you do, knowing that it's just one bad move, maybe not even a move that you yourself make, but your competitors out there around you? We see what happened and the effects of what happened with that big wreck tonight on a lot of our points contenders that were within that top 5 who fell, well out of that because of what happened. What sort of position does that put you in? Does that put you in a little bit more of a defensive position? Does that put you in a little bit more urgent position? How are you feeling about that?
I think defensive. I think I'm in a defensive position to try to stay defensive and just again watch what's going on around me and get out of bad situations. Tonight, a lot of that first, I don't know, 20 or 30, 20 some laps, man. I don't know if I got to go back and watch it, but man, that was intense. But there was a lot of give and take, and it was just, man, that was some amazing racing up there. And but yeah, just probably more defensive. Just still in the defensive. And you'll look at the points through next week. You get down to about 10, 20 to go. You start watching. Okay, who's out? And trust me, I know the points coming in. I know who's third. I know every one of them. I know where they're at. And you got to. I mean, this is a math man's game, and you got to watch those guys as they fall out. You guys, okay, that changes my mentality a little bit. I can push a little harder now because I know they're going to be behind me because they're going to finish behind me. So it's all based on the next lap.
Gotcha. All right. Well, Donnie, we know how much of a heartbreak it is that you haven't been able to get that thing into victory lane with so many second place finishes this season. However, there are people that have gotten you there. Shout outs. Thank you, sponsors. What do you got for us?
I give a big shout out to you guys as always. Great broadcast. And I want to give a shout out to all the ownership at RTG and the old Clips car, man, running good tonight, and looking forward to these next couple weeks and get ready to rock and roll.
Well, he may not have made the playoffs last season, but he has started off the playoffs strong here tonight. Second place for Donnie Garrett, and comfortable spot heading into the elimination race next week. Best of luck to you, Donnie. Maybe we'll talk to you in victory lane. We know it's going to be happening at some point here. That's Donnie Garrett. He brings it home, runner-up here tonight. And now down to victory lane we go. For the third week in a row, we talk with Dante Ricky. Hey, Dante, it's Zach and Seth up here in the booth. You got us?
Yeah, man.
All right, we're going to get to your victory and the precedent that you've been able to set in the last 4 weeks with 4 straight top 2 finishes. But I want to go back because when we were talking with our third and second place finishers, I went back to look at that big one that occurred on lap 30. You were right behind it when it happened, able to get down to the inside to avoid it. Did you know at that point in time just how many playoff contenders had been involved and just how big that wreck had been? And how close were you to getting involved in it?
Wow, that was a scary moment. And I knew I was in a dangerous spot because we had been fighting to get in the middle line. And I believe I was right behind the 712 of Bob Seminara at that moment. And him and Joe made a move into turn 3 to the bottom. And I decided, the about to go 3 wide, the bottom's going to move. I'm going to go down there with Bob. And I saw the contact from the car in the middle with Joe, and I knew Joe was involved. I'm right in there behind Bob, doing the best I could to stay off him. And man, I'm glad I was able to stay off him. But at that point in time, I didn't really know the exact scale of it until I heard that many drivers were involved. And the mindset was, wow, I feel a little bit better about the race in general now, but still, I feel bad for all the people who got caught up in it because these crashes, the crashes really set the tone for tonight's race, and in a bad way. And it really impacted the night for a lot of chase contenders and playoff drivers.
Well, 3 weeks ago, you finished second, and then that seemed to be the spur that got you going back to back to back victories. I'm going to throw a couple of numbers, a couple of statistics at you here. Last season, there was a driver who won 3 races in a row. Last season, there was a driver that won the first race of the playoffs. Oh, by the way, he's the defending champion. So at this point in time, how close are you to feeling that this championship's mine? They're going to have to take it away from me.
Well, it makes my job a little bit easier next week for the Tally Challenge. However, we still have the round of 8 and the final 4 to get to. And in the round of 8, we're going to need another strong performance just like tonight in one of those 2 races where we solidify ourselves as one of those top 4 drivers on the season. And we have work to do. This season is not over again, but it is an amazing achievement of mine to be able to win 3 races. And I had a lot of luck with me as well to be able to do it. And it was just an amazing experience out there tonight to be able to draft with Donnie Garrett. Hats off to Donnie. He's an amazing racer, and I was able to draft with him, and he's a good leader, and I was able to push him into a spot. And then the last pit stop was tough, and we were on the fringe of taking a 2 can pit stop or 1.5 can, and we still had about 2 laps left in the tank of what we could run. So I decided to go 1.5 cans, and that was quite a decision because I didn't know what the remainder of the pack was going to do. And some people coming out of the pits I knew had taken 1.5 can, and they were able to get on the back of the draft with the help of some lap cars and whatnot. And I think there were about, what was it, 8 lead lap cars maybe in the lead pack there at the end, and then a few lappers that were in there too. So the 1.5 can fuel decision was a tough one, being in the lead and burning more fuel, but I also knew 14, 15 laps I'd be able to make it work. And all those facts you threw there, it's an amazing accomplishment, but it also shows that there is more to come, man. I'll tell you that.
Dante, Ricky, congratulations again on your victory tonight. Now, this isn't
Thanks.
the first time that we've seen you and Donnie Garrett work together out on the racetrack. You two certainly not strangers with hooking up in the draft and working together. Now, we've heard Donnie Garrett talk about in the past how it hurts him a little bit not to have teammates. But when you run around somebody like that so consistently, week in and week out, does that give you that much more confidence and that much more faith when you see that driver right in front of you out your windshield or right in your rear view mirror, that that's a guy you can depend on to get yourselves back up to the front?
Definitely, Zach. That is a good feeling to have as a driver, and even the same goes to Joe DeSpirito and Bob Seminara and all of them. I've been able to race good with Bob and Joe the last few weeks, and it's really a shame that Joe got caught up in that big wreck. And he and I and both of them have worked very well with me as well. And Donnie was a good driver to be around tonight in general. He really, I got to give him a lot of credit for my ability to get the win tonight. And working with him, it was a terrific honor to be up in the pack. And having drivers that are your friends, come to the white flag lap, things get interesting, and sometimes it all goes out the window because we were right there down almost two to go, one lap to go, and that yellow flag that really threw an anchor in the finish because it came out when I was in the tri-oval, and it really wasn't the best time for the same exciting finishes that we had the past couple of weeks. So that was a little bit unfortunate, but hey, we're capable of it, and we'll be ready for that challenge when it comes next week. And it's always a good sign to have people to work with throughout the race. And then come down to the last lap, the best man wins.
All right, last question, Dante. I'm going to put you on the spot right now. Third consecutive win on the season. The first half of the season after missing race number 1, it didn't look like you might be a contender to even make it into the playoffs. But with your third consecutive win, this one locking you into round number 2, was this a statement victory for yourself in that 54 car to say, hey guys, I'm going to be a serious contender for the championship this year?
Yes, it was, Zach. Absolutely. Absolutely. We are here and we're solidifying our spot as a top 4 contender, and we're going to do our best to get there. And yeah, I would 100% say we're trying to put our foot down and draw the line in the sand to say, we're going to really make a charge to be there in that final race here in a couple of weeks.
Great to talk to you as always, Dante. Congratulations again on 3 in a row. Thank you. Shout out sponsors. What do you got for us tonight?
Oh, first, big thanks to all of the drivers here at RTG in our RTR series, and especially those who support the Tally Challenge, but also those who race my Tuesday and Wednesday night leagues for the Winston Cup Series on Tuesday and the Air 88s on Wednesday. Big thank you to all of RTG's owners, David Cannon, Sean Prime, Terry Bauman, for everything they do to help bring us such an amazing racing league. And of course, I have to thank Sonny Tolman. Sonny was busy tonight, wasn't able to race. And Sonny, man, we did it again, buddy. I'm just so happy we were able to pull it off. And, we look forward to seeing you again here next week. Also, big thank you to my family, brother, sister, parents, everyone watching tonight. Some of my friends have tuned into the live stream the past few weeks, and it's been really exciting for them. So thank you to all who are supporting and watching. And, we hope to see everybody here next week. And, bring it on, guys. We're going to be here all the way to the end. Thank you.
Several playoff contenders are either going to have to point or win their way in or try and stay in via points. Dante Ricky will not be amongst them. He is the first entry into the round of 8 as he wins the first playoff race here tonight. Congratulations, Dante, and we look forward now that you've got this weight off your shoulders, what you're going to be able to do next week. Maybe go for 4 in a row.
We'll give it a shot, Seth. We'll do our best, man.
As Dante continues to celebrate, I mean, Zach, it always seems like we end up having our playoff contenders run into some issues, but then they manage to find their way up to the front when it matters the most. It was more than likely going to come down between one of our top 3 all playoff contenders, either Dante Ricky, Bob Seminara, or Donnie Garrett.
Absolutely. Unfortunately for other playoff contenders, not the same story, but those 3 certainly making a show of it all the way up till that yellow flag came out to prematurely end our race. Again, as we mentioned, though, Dante Ricky, no complaints. And as much as we know Donnie Garrett wants to get that victory, we know just getting those points to secure himself just a little bit more up towards the top of the playoff standings grids, that's going to be good enough for him. Bob Seminara didn't need a win. He's going to be your points leader coming out of this race unofficially as well. So a lot of shuffling that we talked about at the top of the broadcast, Seth, exactly what we ended up seeing here tonight.
Drivers that win in this first round as well carry 2 bonus points per win in round 1 into the round of 8. Now, in terms of the drivers that are down around the cut line, Jeremy Jeffries was the one that dropped the most, dropped from 3rd down to 9th in the point standings. But everyone, obviously with the exception of Josh Metallic, who will not be here next week, with the sizable fields that we've had week after week, nobody's out of it yet. It's not even a must-win situation for anyone below that cut line. They still could point their way in. Jeremy Jeffries right now is -7. Bernie Mobbs is -16. Hank Middleton is -21. And Chris Emery is -25. With 37, 38, 39 cars in the field, if Billy Ellis or Grant Wesley, guys that are hovering around that cut line, have a bad race, any of those drivers that just named below the cut line could point their way up into the final 8.
They could very well point their way up into that final 8. However, if you're one of those drivers below that cut line, that's a little bit taller feet for you looking at next week. I would think most concerned at this point would be Middleton and Emery being 20 plus points back of that cut line. Billy Elliser, we know he's one of those drivers that's really good at being, really consistent in every one of these races. So he'll be holding on to that 8th spot with a death grip, trying not to let any one of those drivers slip away from him. However, they could all change that with just a single trip to victory lane as well.
Here tonight, we had a little bit of everything that Talladega is known for. We ended up having 3 wide racing, several rows deep at the beginning of the race. Middle portion of the race, the big one struck. We saw the survivors and the drivers that were not able to continue. And at the end of the race, it came down really to green flag pit stops to help Dante Ricci get up to the front of the field and be in the right place at the right time when that caution fell with about 3 laps to go. Next week, I think it's going to be a little bit different because remember the last 2 races of the regular season, we saw a lot of moves that could be classified as desperate. I think a lot of the playoff contenders, we're going to see them race in that somewhat desperate mode to make sure they're going to advance into the round of 8 in those final 7 slots.
Oh, absolutely. I think there's definitely going to be a desperation factor for these guys. You can't just lay down at this point, as we've seen, and it's emphasized a little bit more through the playoffs here, Seth, but it's not really something that we're surprised to see. Season 52 has been pretty wild and unpredictable as a whole. We've seen these point swings happen all season long. It's not new to the playoffs. I think it's just magnified just that much more because there is so much more on the line. And once you're out, you're out. You have no way to contend for that championship once you've fallen below that cut line and can't make your way back in. So that urgency is very real. These guys, obviously, as we heard a couple drivers say, still race for that 14th spot in points. But when you are watching all of your fellow competitors out there on the racetrack go for that championship and run well week in and week out, that's one of those things that just drives you nuts. And with the exception of very few drivers here so far this season, Seth, we've seen no one driver have any clear-cut advantages. Talladega just eat you up and spit you back out again.
Absolutely. Well, last season, we had a driver win 3 races in a row. He went on to be our champion. Dante Ricci here tonight captures his 3rd straight victory and locks himself into the round of 8. Could we have just seen a little precursor for the season finale and possibly our future champion? We're going to have to wait and see because there's still a long ways to go. We got an elimination race for round 1 next week, then 2 more races in the round of 8 to determine the final 4, and then that season finale where, oh yeah, by the way, last year's final 4 finished one behind the other, behind the other, behind the other. It was that close for positioning. So it ain't over yet, and Talladega continues to play its part into formulating who those 4 playoff contenders will be. But a great opener here tonight for the playoffs. Zach, appreciate you joining me in the booth for this one.
Yep, Seth, thank you as always. Thank you, Matt, everybody at Flatout Racing Network who helps put these shows on. Appreciate all of you. Of course, RTG, the drivers, owners, admins, race directors, everybody who week in and week out puts in all the hard work. And of course, at home viewing, you, the race fan. We appreciate all of you. We hope you've enjoyed tonight's race. Seth, look forward to talking to you next week. Thank you very much.
Dante Ricci has claimed an Elite 8 spot. Who will get the final 7 positions? We'll find out next week as Race 11's green flag will be flying at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You're not going to want to miss it. 13 drivers enter, only 8 will move on. For Zach Fremau, I'm Seth Cole. Thanks for tuning in to another race here tonight for Season 52 of the RTG Tally Challenge here on the Flatout Racing Network.
This broadcast is the copyrighted work of Flatout Racing Network and may not be rebroadcast, retranslated, or used in any form without the express written consent of Flatout Racing Network and iRacing.com Motorsports Simulations. Flatout Racing Network would like to thank you for your support, and we hope you enjoyed tonight's broadcast.